Drilling fluids touch just about everything in the drilling process. We're here to deconstruct the drilling process and drilling fluid concepts to provide a deeper understanding of our industry. In each episode, we'll share information, talk to interesting people, and maybe share a few stories along the way. Welcome to the Flowline, a production of AES Drilling Fluids, brought to you by Matt Offenbacher and Justin Gauthier.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Flowline. Matt and I here in the studio after a good, nice, beautiful weathered weekend. Matt, anything fun happened this weekend in your world or what?
Just, kids soccer. Good time, little coffee shop. They brought out a bounce house, so we stayed a little extra late with that.
Heck yeah. Very nice.
Generally uneventful, just, church on Sunday, and then there's a nonprofit organization that I'm getting involved with here in town, and we had our first kind of meeting to set up a board. So that was kind of,
Tell us more.
There's a ministry I've been involved with for a while called Jericho Road Renewal, and guy I know, he's been running it for a number of years, but it's designed to help with people in transition. So you get one of the big challenges in Houston and many other cities is, let's say you get out of recovery and you don't have a strong family background to go back to, or perhaps you just don't have the means to really live on your own. Mm-hmm. That tends to lead to relapsing.
Yeah.
And it may not even be necessarily drug addiction. It can just be other difficult circumstances. And so This is sort of a ministry intended to kind of help people take that next step, create some financial independence, get them sort of stable, work, that kind of thing. Been kind of involved with that for a while, and sort of as they've sort of grown and iterated through, and
nice.
They're starting to do a bakery thing that's had some bread brought over to the office the other day.
That's part of it. Okay, I remember having some sourdough, I believe it was.
Yeah, it's very good bread.
Was amazing.
But it's cool because that's been a thing where a lot of these folks have trouble getting a job with kind of a past, but you can give them sort of a track record where they can earn income, feel good about themselves. And now when they go apply for a job, they say, "Look, I've been doing this for a year now, and here's what I've learned," and so that sort of helps give them a leg up, as opposed to like, "Hey, I really haven't worked in a long time, and like I'd love to come work here,"
Yeah.
So, anyways,
it's kind of like an on ramp to, other greater things.
Yeah, hopefully. So, I've got to know a few of the guys who are living in some of the housing over the years, and it's just cool to see their stories. It's not always like it's not everything's up. So you've got to take the highs and the lows, but learn a ton from every time I visit with them or learn more. So, anyways, we're just trying to get a little more organized and hopefully structure that in a way where we can serve those people best and also maybe help more people.
Man, that is super cool. And then too, you also came back from Romania.
Yes.
Which I don't know if in the other episodes you kind of highlighted the why, but can you give us just the elevator sort of spiel on what you were doing over there?
Yeah, it's the short of it is seeing friends, but I guess this is just sort of where fate led me. I think addiction recovery has been something that's been near and dear to my heart for a while. In 2012, I met a pastor who was running a recovery center in Romania, here in Houston, and he said, "Hey, come visit," and that sort of thing. And so I went and stayed at the center and got to know some folks and started coming back. And the really cool thing about it is, you go and they ask you to speak and offer some encouragement, or you might help out, but mostly it's just spending time with people. But since 2012, I've been back, 8 or 9 times, to the point where guys who were staying there as what you would call students have graduated. They're now working, they get married, they have kids, and they're still kind of involved in all this. And so it's really like now I go back and I probably see 30 or 40 of my friends. Wow. And you check in every year, and each year there's a new story. So it really just recharges my batteries. And
that's so cool.
So yeah, those are I think when we're fortunate enough to have some resources and even a few extra vacation days and a permissive wife who encourages those kinds of things. it's something that I think it's hard in the big picture to take the time away.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you're like, I'm way better off now than I would have been saying, oh, I got stuff to do.
Yeah.
So
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
What and care to share as much or as little detail as possible, but you mentioned recovery is sort of like helping in that way is near and dear to your heart. I mean, like, why? Because as long as I've known you've been doing this, but I've never really asked the question why. And don't worry, folks, we'll get on the drilling fluids to this. Just bear with us, okay? Yeah. And you can fast forward if you want, but I'm curious, and maybe some of the listeners are too.
Yeah, well, I mean, the interesting thing is I've been fortunate that I never struggled with addiction myself. I think all of us know someone who has, and I think we know how difficult that is. Kind of the process of being really frustrated or angry at somebody in some ways for their behavior, and then like separating who they are and the thing that's consuming them. And I think I realized early on when I saw people struggle with that I was just as susceptible to it as them. Perhaps I don't have the thankfully I don't have a family background that maybe lent me to that or those sort of things, but like you drop me into some of the situations these other folks have been in, and I don't know if I would make any different choices than them. And so I think I've just been very aware of that, and out of that, I think I've not only like learned a lot from spending time with those folks, but it's helped me. I've grown so much and I've learned so much that I think that sort of keeps drawing me back in.
Yeah.
I realize how much I don't know about people.
Yeah.
And like sort of my world and where I see things, and I realize like there's whole other perspectives and things I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever see a world after oil and gas where that becomes more of like a full-time thing, or is this just more of like a vacation where you're interested, but it's helpful to like recharge, unplug, but you know what I mean?
I mean, probably. Like I think I want to, no matter what, stay involved in these things. I mean, like I said, I've got all these close friends now that I got to go back and see them.
Yeah.
I guess without offering, there's also like an aspect where I need to continue making enough money so that I can help send some in that direction. And so I think that's part of the partnership is, I kind of, my wife and I have found some core places where we want to contribute with, and the other part of that is like we would kind of want our whole hearts there. So not just write a check and sort of feel good about that, but also
put in the work.
Know the people. And so anyways, I think I need a paying job for a while if I hope to contribute in the way I hope to contribute.
Yeah. So no, it's fascinating, very selfless, and I'm sure the listeners are quite just impressed, for lack of better terms. But last question before we get on to the drilling fluids topic is, for the nonprofit that you're starting, if anyone listening, if it piques interest and they're like, I wish I could help or contribute, I mean, is there a way for, say, the listeners who want to contribute somehow or help with your nonprofit? I mean, throwing it out there, I don't know.
That'd be fabulous. I mean, so Jericho Road Renewal, I think it's jerichoroadrenewal.org. If you Google it, it'll come up.
Yeah.
And like all good nonprofits, there's a little button you can click that says donate.
Yeah.
It means a lot to the folks involved, and I could tell you with my own eyes that it goes where it should go,
which is important, because a lot, you don't know where your money goes when you like to contribute or help somewhere. Sometimes you just kind of hope it goes to the right place. But clearly Matt's if you know Matt, he does things right and makes sure nothing goes to waste, and he'd be very critical if things weren't going in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm really cheap, so
no, that's great. Well, again, I think it's cool, and for the listeners, hopefully you've tuned in. And again, I think part of the podcast is cool to learn about drilling fluids, but also cool to learn about us. If you've been listening for years, you know probably more about our lives than a lot of people. So, and now you know more. Moving on to a drilling fluid topic, something that, again, we're always dealing with, different fluids and especially different densities. But when you change something or you go from one end of the spectrum to another end of the spectrum, especially if it's on the sort of the higher end of the spectrum, there's other considerations. And so the topic today is talking about heavy mud considerations. And we did a topic or an episode not long ago, is like, how heavy can you go? But I don't think we talked about the other considerations when you look at the whole system, is when you get up to a certain density, there's other things you have to consider so that other parts of the system don't break down.
Yes.
And so, Matt, that's kind of it today. You came up with the topic, and so I'll let you kind of kick things off.
I think, with heavy mud, we get the, like you said, how heavy can you get? But, like, there's a lot of practical implications that start to fall in line where even if I could make you a barrel of mud that was very heavy, how are we going to be successful with it operationally?
Yeah.
And, the first question, of course, is, are you just trying to kill something? Are you trying to kill the well, or do you actually want to drill with this? And, I mean, because a pumpable fluid versus a fluid that would perform more of a drilling fluid circulating function is sort of two different tasks. And well killing sometimes is like, oh, I just need a little bit. I'm going to pump it down the backside, and, that'll be that. And so that's like a pretty small volume. That may be on a workover, or it could be some other set of circumstances where you just need a certain column. Drilling and circulating is a whole nother animal, because at some point you have to start looking and saying, well, you can't circulate as fast. You're probably not going to drill as fast because this fluid is so heavy and solids laden.
Right.
And so, we start there, and the question is, okay, how are we going to mix this thing up depending on the parameters we're trying to achieve? For a lot of our, day-to-day, if it's, hey, just use what's out there, it's going to be Bayrite. And it's probably going to be 4-1 Bayrite. Some folks even use, 395 out there. But if we know you need it, you can get higher specific gravity Bayrite. It's going to cost a lot more. You're going to want it isolated. There's going to be some other things to think about, but a higher specific gravity weight material gives you a little more room for fluid. So your fluid's less solids, but it could be you get so heavy that you have to blend it with hematite, and hematite is abrasive, it's magnetic. There's other issues that could affect your tools, it could affect your equipment. And then there's other alternatives that you might look at. And even with those weight materials, some of them you can pneumatically convey, some of them you cannot. So can you handle big bags at the rig? Do you, is it in a concentrate or a slurry where you pump it over as a concentrate, so treat it like a brine, a heavy fluid? So these things can all come into consideration. Fine grind material, which is almost like paint. Are you ready to make sure that stuff doesn't dry up in the threads of your drill pipe? Do you have a wash gun ready to clean out those threads? Because otherwise, when you're like breaking out connections, it's miserable.
Yeah.
That from a like practical perspective, and then what happens? Okay, you said you need let's pretend it's a 21-pound mud, very, very heavy. Well, what are you going to do for slugs? What are you going to do for well control? What happens if you take pressure? You're already picking a really heavy mud weight. There's got to be something down there that's driving that decision. Do you have any room to increase mud weight? And what is your acceptable margin of risk?
Yeah.
So those are just like the very first sort of nuts and bolts.
Yeah, that's imagine drilling with an 18 or 20-pound mud, and then you need something a few pounds over to kill a well. It's like, what do you do? Like, that's something that, again, it's not something we see a lot in unconventionals. But depending who, maybe we go on an exploration run here, and all of a sudden they're drilling some deep gas well that requires these somewhere. And so these are things that someone would need to be thinking through. On both obviously on the mud side, and then drilling engineer and everyone on the ops team. But when it comes to operationally, mixing is always a key sort of factor, and just how you go about the procedure and how fast and this and that. But when you get up to that density, I guess the higher the density or the more complex system, it's very important to follow the proper steps and to not rush through these things. So talk a little bit about the mixing side of something this heavy.
I mean, it's one of those where whatever you start from, you keep adding weight material, and it's going to get slower and slower and slower because you need that dry material. If you think about it, even with water-based mud, like you need that Bayrite to hydrate, even though it's inherently water wet, you can't have a clump of it floating around in there. You've got to get dispersed. The surface is wetted, and that all takes more and more time. And so the question is, all right, if you got a pretty heavy mud, you almost certainly, it would make the most sense to mix it at a plant with that equipment. However, how many trucks is that going to take when you can't fill them all the way because of, weight restrictions? Yeah. So now, you're going to be, 40 barrels or something? You're pretty restricted on moving this stuff around.
Yeah.
So you may even need a good mixing pit at the rig just to be, extra careful with all that stuff. But if you're using a lot of barite at the rig, how many bulk tanks do you need? Where are you going to put them all?
Yeah.
How are you going to make sure that the truck can access them? All those other considerations.
Oh yeah.
Oil wetting. Are you adding enough wetting agent for all that surface area? Are you, we've talked about this before. Are you adding, when you're weighting up, are you adding base oil and other things that seem sort of counterintuitive?
Yeah.
And then the other part of it is, because this stuff takes so long and it's so heavy and so solids laden, and you want to keep it mixing, this fluid's going to get hot.
Right.
And now you're going to deal with evaporation, means, possible dehydration. So now you're trying to weight up this mud and you're like putting water to it. And you're just like, what? Am I making any progress here or not?
Yeah.
So it requires a tremendous amount of patience and consideration as we get towards these really, really heavy densities. And that's all with like good planning and things set out right. So hopefully you don't have to do this in a pinch,
Yeah, no, most definitely. Well, assuming you got the mixing part down, how do you think the stuff is acting downhole, say, for hole cleaning and stuff like that? What's your take on that?
Well, the interesting thing with hole cleaning is the closer you get in mud weight to the density of your cuttings, so, a 2.6 specific gravity cutting versus, now you're north of 2 specific, you're 2.2, 2.3 specific gravity mud, they're pretty close together. And so it's actually just becoming part of your circulating fluid,
right,
as opposed to this huge differential where you're thinking about how to convey something heavy in a fluid that's less dense. So hole cleaning actually is a lot more forgiving. The other part of it is, in all likelihood, you're not drilling that fast if you're drilling. And so then you have to think about your circulating rates might be lower, but how about everything coming back at the shakers? Is it, am I just going to be stripping out a bunch of weight material and then fighting to add more?
Yeah.
Or, barite recovery, if I'm thinking about running a centrifuge, how well are my surface pumps going to hold up with all these solids?
Yeah.
So that, it gets messy fast.
Yeah. No, I mean, you really, and you mentioned solids control, and I was going to ask you about that. It's, how do you think through the backyard, right? Because that plays a whole nother, just lots more to consider. And especially, with the screen size and stuff, and, depending how hard you're pumping, because that mud is probably going to be pretty thick. And so, do you then adjust your screen size? Okay, well, then if you do, then are you going to get more solids in the system? So then are you going to have to dilute? Well, if so, is your sort of barite burn rate going to go up? There's a lot of things to think about. And so, again, you mentioned it. And then barite recovery, I know, everyone has an opinion about barite recovery. But at that weight, I think most would support, strongly considering barite recovery. Because if not, then you will be spending a lot of money. If you're centrifuging, trying to keep your whole, your system clean, especially with the centrifuge. And then if you're, no, we're just going to, dilute. Well, then you're going to use a lot of barite to keep up, and you might end up having a ton of mud that you don't need afterwards. So anyway, again, lots to think about there. Matt, what would you say mud check wise? Is there anything when you're running your mud checks that you have to think about differently with that much solids in the system?
I think, these solids tend to gum everything up. We had that episode not that long ago where somebody said, hey, I can't get a 600 reading on this mud. It's so heavy.
Yeah.
So checking your rheology. What spraying constant are you going to use? Are you going to be prepared for that? The other thing is the fluid is mostly barite at this point. And so, even checking fluid loss or whatever, you're going to find just leaving your fluid static with some sort of overbalance pressure on it, your filter cake's going to be a mass of barite. And it doesn't necessarily imply your actual fluid loss per se. Like, you're not going to know how much of it is gravity and barite versus, you know, my actual like properties of how quickly bridging and sealing my fluid is, but you're probably okay.
Right.
But trying to take those measurements as part of a mud check can just get hairy to some degree. So I think there's just a lot of those aspects where, and you know, even, hey, I need to get some rheology so I can run hydraulics. How am I going to do that if I can't get that 600 RPM reading, or, you know?
Right.
So you gotta. The only thing I can say is in general, you're probably drilling slowly. So if you're a mud engineer and you're racing around checking the pits and you're mixing slowly, you've probably got more time to deal with some of these things like your mud check.
Yeah.
But it's going to be more tedious. It's going to be a lot more annoying to clean equipment. All the above.
Yeah. No, that's exactly. And then on the equipment side, not for mud equipment per se, but just on the rig, and stuff that isn't necessarily stuff that we dictate or that's in our control. But again, as mud touches everything, you need to kind of understand what, sort of the effects of the mud going through, whether it be the pumps, the BOPs, everything else. Talk a little bit through the equipment side and how we sort of think about that from our seat.
Well, I guess we get these questions of how heavy can you get, and then we have to circle back to the question of, even if I can mix that for you, is the rig going to be able to do it? Mm-hmm. And so, obviously, what are the pumps set up for, and I mean, what circulating pressure can they even handle?
Yeah.
Equally, far more important is BOPs. So, I mean, I've been involved in exploration work or reviewed old reports when I was involved in exploration work where the reason they stopped drilling is they got up to like 20 pounds per gallon of mud and they couldn't test the BOP. Like, they had no kick tolerance left.
No.
And so it was just like, okay, pump some cement. There's something down there, but we can't put a well in the ground on this. And then, downhole tools, right? Like, what can they handle as far as pressures and solids tolerance? Because overwhelmingly, it's not going to be drilled solids, but it's going to be a bunch of barite, which is relatively soft, but there's a lot of it, and there's a lot of ways for it to jam things up, and many of these tools are not proven at these high densities.
Yep.
So, and then this isn't really equipment, but I think it's well control related. And I think a really big question that I have when we get asked, like, hey, can you get me a 21, 22 pound per gallon mud? Even if the answer is yes, what formations are down there that can hold that? Because you've got to be pretty deep and cased off. I mean, if you think about it, there's just not a lot of places where you could drill very far through a formation before you're going to fail something at the shoe just by the overburden pressure relative to, rock strength and everything.
Yeah. And hopefully the on the customer side or on the E&P side, that they've designed this knowing you're going to go into a lateral, I'm assuming, with that much weight. And so obviously casing design is huge, which we're not typically a part of. But if you have offsets and us as the mud company is saying, hey, you're programming this for 14, but we see more like 16 or 18, which that'd be a big jump and may not happen. But that being said, there may be some redesign on their end to make sure that, hey, look, if we do run into these type of mud weights, like, we got to make sure we don't blow our shoe apart, because then we're in a world of hurt. And so well design well design is always important, but even more critical when you're dealing with these types of densities, because it could go south real fast.
Yes, and just imagine starting to lose mud and needing to build volume, miserable at the rig.
Yeah.
Try and do it at the plant. Guess what? I can't truck it as far. You're going to probably find yourself in a position where you're just going to try and get the heaviest mud that you can and then weighted up somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but there's going to be a lot of trucks on the road. So I guess those are all, I'm sure we missed some, but those are all the things that came to mind when I just sort of ran through, as we talk about hypotheticals with drilling with really heavy mud.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's make sure we're comfortable with all this stuff, because I might be able to mix you a barrel of it. The lab testing looks good. We've got a procedure written up. But what happens when it gets to the rig? Because that's when the problems could begin.
Mm-hmm.
So
No, that's a great topic. And if anyone out there has any experience drilling or, building mud weights up around, that 18 to 20 pounds, like we always say, please reach out, share a story, or it's just some good insight perhaps, or things that you've found that worked really well, or anything around that topic. And but yeah, you can reach us at the Flowline podcast at aesfluids.com, or you can hit us up on LinkedIn. Matt and I are on there. Be sure to connect with AES on LinkedIn. Again, ton of great content being put out there as always. The YouTube videos are great if you like to watch videos and learn at the same time. Again, the tech tips are out there. Matt, do we have any other sort of video campaigns, educational pieces? Doesn't necessarily have to be the video stuff, but any sort of educational things coming down the pipeline, or is it just kind of continuing to educate as we have been?
I mean, yeah, so we got more videos in the pipeline. I know we're reviewing a tech tip on lubricity here that should be out imminently.
Cool.
We're rehashing some of our older videos in sort of 60-second bites. So Addie and her team are we got a lot of stuff in the pipeline.
Awesome.
And look, if you have something you really feel like needs to be put together in video format, reach out. Maybe that'll be our next idea.
Yeah.
So.
Well, with that being said, folks, really appreciate all the support. And until next time, be safe out there.
Take care.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening. Please tune in next week for another exciting episode of The Flowline. And remember, may your returns always be full and your trips always smooth. Views expressed in this program belong to participants and not their employees. The program is for informational purposes only and cannot take the place of seeking professional advice. Copyright AES Drilling Fluids.